For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeff Knopf. I'm a professor here at the Middlebury Institute, and I have the privilege to serve as the chair of our master's degree program in nonproliferation and terrorism studies. If you saw the online program announcement, you'll know that I am a substitute as the moderator for this event. My colleague here at the Center for Nonproliferation Studies, Jean Dupreez, was supposed to be the moderator, but unfortunately he was not able to be here today, so I am stepping in. But I am stepping in for a really great event that I'm very, very excited about. The official title for this seminar is Russia's War on Ukraine, the Implications for the Global Nuclear Order. We have five really terrific speakers who are going to talk for about 10 minutes each so that we can get through all of their comments. All five are former visiting fellows here at CNS, so it is an extra pleasure to welcome all of you back. And I guess a couple cases, it was during COVID time, so I can't remember if you were even here in person or it was all online, so maybe it's a first welcome in some cases. I can juggle my phone and my notes and my brain all at the same time. I'll try to give everybody an introduction. Sitting immediately to my left is Polina Sinovets. She's the director of the Odesa Center for Nonproliferation, and she'll be the first speaker, and she'll introduce the project. The other speakers are Iryna Maksymenko, who is an associate professor in the Department of International Relations at the Odesa I. Mechnikov National University. We will also hear from Valeriia Gergiieva, who is a visiting research fellow at the Institute for Peace Research and Security Policy at the University of Hamburg in Germany. Ms. Valeriia Hesse, who's a non-resident fellow with the Odesa Center for Nonproliferation, and Tetyana Melnyk, who's a research consultant with the Odesa Center for Nonproliferation and also an accredited parliamentary assistant at the European Parliament, working in the office of the Polish member of the European Parliament, Marek Balt. And Polina, you'll have to remember me the order of speakers that we agreed on because I've already forgotten. But I know that you're first, so why don't you take over?
It's a good news. Yeah, I think that it will be me, then Iryna, then Valeriia Gergiieva, then Tetyana, Valeriia Hesse, as the order of the presentation was built up in that way. So, first of all, good afternoon, dear colleagues and friends. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to present our book here at the, I would say, at the cradle of non-proliferation studies of Odesa, because if there was no CNS, there would not be non-proliferation studies in Odesa. So this is the alma mater for all of us and for me personally, and this is why it's so, I'm so happy to be here and to present our book here. So this is the project which we started immediately, the plan for the project was started immediately after the beginning of the war. But actually it has become the result of the OdCNP Summer Workshop 2022, which was conducted in Malta. So, of course, there are a lot of conclusions and ideas which has been already, because the situation is very dynamic, even with the war, which has already been a bit changed and elaborated. But, you know, this is the initial push we were standing on, the first conclusions on what kind of implications the Russia's war on Ukraine made on nuclear world order, and actually this is it was the main goal. Oh,
right and left.
Disappeared. Okay,
there you go.
Okay, okay, good. So you see, as far as this presentation was partially made by my honored co-author and co-editor Editor Vicente, who is also deriving from the CNS mafia. I mean, you know, it's inevitable. Only CNS mafia is permitted to participate in this beautiful book. I would not, of course, read all these ideas, all these aims. However, I would say that the main aim of the book was to provide answers, perspectives, and to give new ideas about the influence which Russia's war in Ukraine had and would potentially have for the nuclear world order. And as you see, now you will, again, you will not see it in this way, but you will see it in that way. No, you won't see it, but if you have a very good eyes, then you may understand what is written there. As you see, we have a very big set of authors, very distinguished, very famous, not so famous, very young, and very already established. And we tried to cover as much as possible topics such as the developments within the domain of arms control, the development of missile technologies, what is happening with deterrence and disarmament as a result of that war, what is happening to non-proliferation regime, how are the other nuclear actors behaving, such as not only Russia and the United States, but also Iran, how other international events were connected and that were developing, such as the enlargement of NATO, which happened because of because of the start of the Russia's war in Ukraine, but also how it affected and will potentially affect the nuclear world order. This is why I can also I even would not call all the authors participated in this book because there are numerous ones. Besides all who will present today, we have Federica Dell'Arche from VCDNP, we have Nikolai Sokov, we have Lukasz Kulesa, we have Valentina Casar from Malta, Julien Caron from Paris. So we have a lot of authors, and that gave us the opportunity to make a very wide project and to look at this issue from the different perspectives. Well, then, I hope that I intrigued you enough to start buying this book, reading it. Now I would like to pay a little bit attention to the chapters, to my chapter, which we made together with Iryna Maksymenko, and which was dedicated to the first conclusions on the development of nuclear deterrence and on the influence which Russia's war in Ukraine had on nuclear deterrence. So first of all, of course, it's not a very new idea that nuclear deterrence has become very popular since the start of Russia's war in Ukraine, because, well, it was obvious, it seemed to be obvious before, but now it became very clear that nuclear deterrence is a very multifunctional concept or doctrine or policy or strategy, whatever it is, because it's all of it. It's very multifunctional. And first, what we could hear at 4 in the morning on the 24th of February of 2022, when the first Russian missiles started to hit targets at the territory of Ukraine, was Putin's speech, who said that whoever interfering in this conflict would have the unprecedented consequences they had never faced in the history. And it was a very strong hint on the possibility of using nuclear weapons against those who will interfere in this war directly. And first of all, of course, it was a strong hint to the United States and NATO to stay away from the conflict. And as we see, nobody actually interfered. And as soon as somebody wants to do this, then we have a very strong warning from Moscow saying that, hold on, it's dangerous. Otherwise, we'll have a global nuclear war. Now, since then, we can see that this, I would say, umbrella option of nuclear deterrence turned to be quite successful for Russia because nobody did that. And it opened a very, bad example for all international actors to understand that actually you can have hands free for any kind of aggression against your neighbor since you are having nuclear weapons, and then you will not be punished if you are not really afraid of international economic sanctions. The second, dimension of nuclear deterrence. We were trying to regard it in two ways. In the framework of the so-called theory of influence, where deterrence is presented not only as the direct prevention of other actors from interference in the conflict, but also as the policy of persuasion to stay away from certain other actions, or to do certain other actions, which is a coercion strategy. So in Russia's performance, deterrence was quite successful, as you see. However, coercion showed different results. Regarding deterrence, the only domain where it proved its quite low efficiency was Ukraine and its counteroffensive operation, which has also been proved by the classic deterrence theory before, that non-nuclear states are not really deterred by nuclear weapons. However, when we are speaking about the main object of deterrence of Russian nuclear weapons, the alliance, North Atlantic Alliance, and then the United States in particular, it was quite successful. However, if we look at the coercion strategy, and also if we look at the deterrence, we will see certain inconsistencies and certain failures and developments in the domain. Well, not just fixing on, not stopping on some kind of very particular topics. I would like to remind that there were just 3 important speeches of Putin when we were writing the book. The first one was at the beginning of the war, which I touched upon before. The second one was in May 2022, when Putin strongly warned from the supply of the long-range arms to Ukraine. And then it looked like successful, but partially successful, because the United States still restraining from supplying Ukraine with a large number of attackers. However, UK and France provided Ukraine with the long-range missiles such as Scalp. And also, the third speech was one of the most interesting. It was the speech dedicated to the annexation of Ukrainian territories from Ukraine, which Putin pronounced, saying that Russia would not be restrained from using whatever means available to stop any kind of attempts to bring those.
It's Odesa.
Very relevant moment. This is the alarm under attack, which we all hear in Ukraine. Yes, but so coming back to that kind of relevant issue. That moment, that September of 2022, was the most dangerous for the, I would say, for non-proliferation regime, for nuclear world order, and for the whole situation, because it looked like Putin is quite close from using nuclear weapons, or from really planning of using nuclear weapons. However, at that moment, we could observe the work of deterrence from the side of the United States and NATO, in particular, because there was a strong interpersonal, like close channels communication between Washington and Moscow, where there was the very strong hint was sent to Russia that in case of using, if nuclear weapons will be used against Ukraine, then there will be a conventional retaliation from the side of France, UK, and the United States. And then what we could observe was the very strong feedback from Moscow when Putin said that there had never been any plans or ideas to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine. It's not efficient, not effective. It's stupid, and the only who used nuclear weapons were the United States. So and then the same message was reiterated by Russian MFA. And shortly, just in 2 weeks after. So we could see that deterrence worked in the 2 dimensions. From Russia towards NATO and from NATO towards Russia. And the interesting moment was that actually Ukraine has never been the member of alliance, but the use of nuclear weapons could become such a global issue that deterrence went on beyond the borders of alliance and was projected against Russia to keep it away from using potential use of nuclear weapons. And then, since then, we never heard any escalation speeches from Putin since the last address to the Federal Assembly in February this year, like just a couple of days ago, when Putin was just replying on the words of Macron that that the possibility of sending troops to Ukraine is not ruled out. Of course, it's not written in the book. Of course, it's some elaboration. But what I could observe from that event was the fact that nuclear coercion, which looked quite, which showed the decrease of its efficiency by the end of the second year of the war, again looked like showed it revival and the increase of its efficiency, because then immediately after the Putin speech we could hear the words of leader of Germany, Olaf Scholz, who said that Germany will refrain from even sending weapons to Ukraine. Also, we heard the words from the leaders of the UK, the United States, and others that they are never planned to send any troops to Ukraine, and therefore it looks like, of course, it's deterrence versus coercion, but it's still nuclear coercion because it's touching upon not only the direct military operation but also the supply of arms to Ukraine. And now I would say that there are two news, coming back to the conclusion. There are two news. One is, actually they're all bad. But the good news is only for those who are researching nuclear deterrence, because the good news is that deterrence is very much alive, and it's going to be alive for a pretty long time. And probably I would say that the only chance for nuclear disarmament, nuclear non-proliferation, and for pushing back the development of the popularity of nuclear deterrence is Ukraine victory in this war, because it will show that non-nuclear state can win in the war, no matter of all nuclear signaling, nuclear coercion, and deterrence the nuclear state is practicing. Otherwise, nuclear deterrence has a very high chance to become the most popular strategy of this century. Very tempting example for those states who are cherishing aggressive plans and who was always thinking to find some magic instrument of power and magic instrument of not being punished for what they are planning to do. So this is, I don't know whether it's a good or bad news. It depends for whom. For researchers, it's like for doctors who are finding, or for biologists who are finding some kind of terrible disease that they can fight with. Maybe it's sort of the news which can deprive them of being bored. However, it's a very bad news for the nuclear world order. It's a very bad news for nuclear non-proliferation regime, for the Article 6, where we all know that it's written the provision of nuclear disarmament. Because, yes, we know that all these events, all this war of Russia against Ukraine, it started the wave of non-nuclear states to consolidate and to increase their movement. However, the more this movement is consolidating and increasing, the more we can see the gap between two worlds, nuclear world and non-nuclear world, and the more it's becoming obvious that we won't see the reconciliation between two sides anytime soon, and it means that global nuclear disarmament is somewhere very far away. Thank you very much for your attention.
I would like to present the one of the chapters dedicated to the regional cases and the implications of Russia war on Ukraine, on regional security and the security posture of some countries. And exactly now I will talk about Finland and Sweden's decision to join NATO. And yes, also it's very important to stress that this chapter was done by three authors. It's Adrita Vicente, Ali Alkish, and yes, and so that's why in my presentation I will focus mostly on the answering our research question, because also the chapter is much broader. I will explain it. So first of all, we decided to examine the how Russia's how has Russia's war on Ukraine impact Sweden and Finland decision to join NATO due to the tradition of neutrality and non-alignment status? And also the second part of our research question was, what are security implications for the global nuclear order? Of course, we try to explain a little bit about the Finland and Sweden pre-2022 posture, security posture, and also to describe the obstacles on Finland and Sweden way to NATO. So the chapter was also dedicated to Turkish and Hungary positions on these new potential members. But finally, we can also express from Ukrainian side, I would like to say, that we are very happy that Finland and Sweden, finally, both of these countries are members of NATO, and we do hope that the 34th member of NATO will be Ukraine, and Georgia maybe will follow us very soon. So talking about our chapter, yes, as I mentioned before, we have research questions divided into sub-parts. And speaking about our outcomes, I would like to mention with regard to the first part of the question about role of NATO, but we arrived to the such conclusions. So first of all, it's important to stress that Ukraine's case since 2014, but most of all 2022, increased first threat perception in these two countries. For example, in Finland, since 2014, they start to conduct public polls, researchers, how it can affect also Finland in future. Sweden, due its geographical position and a little bit far from Russia, it was a little bit difficult. But anyway, we could also find rather interesting results of public opinion survey, and it's I will talk about this a little bit later. But it's also very provide a very clear picture on the changing of threat perception in these countries. But most of all, I would like to say that this threat perception was related to a deterioration of both European and international security, and these countries stressed that it was structural and long-term deterioration. And of course, it's rather interesting that in 2022, in 2 months, Finland and Sweden, they published rather interesting official documents, papers, describing how their security posture has changed. It was also very important for our chapter as well. And in this case, we can say that, yes, the security concerns rise up very high due to geographical position, but also due to Russia as a nuclear power state, but also as an unpredictable neighbor. And this was one of the reasons why Finland and Sweden changed their traditional posture about neutrality or non-alignment status. It's a rather interesting expression of one of the Finnish government who said that any policy of neutrality is a thing of the past. And you see here, I would like just to make a very brief step back, talking about Ukraine, your attention to Ukraine, because from what we start, and Moldova is also very close to this position, we start from demands from Russia that Ukraine has officially recognized its status as neutral country. Okay, but in 2014, on the legal level, there is a law stated that Ukraine is neutral country. Moldova, on the constitutional level, it's also stated that Moldova is a neutral country. And now we can see that Russia stress and continue to stress that both of these countries have to proclaim neutrality. Okay, is it reason to start war, or is it a tool to secure our territorial integrity, our sovereignty, and so on and so on? So we can see that Finland and Sweden did absolutely right, learned absolutely lesson, and did very correct decision to look for allies and to join NATO. In this case, it's also very important to stress that the failure of Budapest Memorandum also affect very much these countries and their perception. And it's also very important to the second part of our research about implications for global nuclear order. Also, speaking about public opinion, I would like to stress that before, yes, there is on the slide, we prepare these two charts, how public opinion changed since 2014 to July 2022. It was the last data we could find, so we just include them. And so we can see, for example, about Finland, that on 2014, the public opinion was mostly against joining NATO, but it started gradually decreased and significantly changed at the end of 2021. Then Russia started to place the troops, the huge amount of troops near the borders of Ukraine. And of course, with February 2022, the public opinion changed drastically. We can see from 26% to almost 80%. And it's really very, very effective. In Sweden case, it's a little bit different. It's more smooth, but anyway, till the mid of 2022, we can see that public opinion was very strong for membership, Sweden membership to NATO. And yes, back to the previous slide. Oh, sorry, talking about the outcomes for implications for global nuclear order. So Polina already mentioned some of also our outcomes, but that's why I will not maybe focus too much on them. It's about the hammering the global nuclear disarmament agenda, as well as damaging effect on the nuclear non-proliferation regime. But also, I would like to say that it also related to the potential spread of the nuclear umbrella and sharing states. But again, it's we are talking about how to strengthen security on the local, regional level, but also how it affects the global nuclear order. And in this case, we can say, yes, that unfortunately, one of the effects is that a lot of non-nuclear weapon states will rely mostly on the alliance with nuclear weapon states, or to, I don't know, to start to provide the elaboration of their own tool, nuclear weapons, to enhance their national security. And also these all can lead to new arms race, and mostly it's related to the Russian reactions on any kind of such statement on future membership of Finland, Sweden, or Ukraine, that it is going to replace tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus, for example, and so on. And of course, it's these impacts, they are mostly potential, but now we can see already how it's related and how its effect and can be used by Putin, for example, during strategic dialogue with United States on arms control and other issues. It's about North Korea, it's about Iran, and so on. And I would like to stop here, yes, mentioning Iran, and to do a linkage to the next presenter.
Thank you so much.
So it's my pleasure today to be here and to present my chapter. You can see the name. It's How did the Russian invasion of Ukraine influence Iran's approach to the nuclear threshold? Of course, you all hear a lot about Iran, and it's important to tell you why is it important still to talk about Iran, because sometimes I feel that people are tired about Iran, when someone here like, yes, I'm working with Iranian nuclear program, they are like, okay. So why it is still important to talk about Iran? Because I will, of course, explain it in my chapter, and just like maybe a few points here, that it's already like for 20 years, it's a matter of international concern. And that's why it's still important, because from the 2003 till now, Iran became step by step, slowly, but a threshold state. In my chapter, I identify how the Russian invasion influenced also these threshold motivations. Because after maybe 5 minutes later, you will understand that it's really has its influence, and why it is dangerous, why it can cause even more international concerns in the future. Also, Iran, it's a country in the Middle East region. All of you know that the Middle East region, it's a region of quite unstable region, yes, with its own difficulties. So Iran as a nuclear state will complicate the situation in the Middle East. That's why it's important to continue the negotiations with Iran. Also, Iran is quite a rich country. It has the second place of its oil resources after Saudi Arabia, and the second with the gas resources after Russia. So it's quite a rich country, which means also kind of danger, because if no sanctions or reliable partners and it's possible to restore the economy, Iran can have enough sources to develop further its nuclear program and also ballistic missile program. Also, Iran has quite significant ballistic missile program, the biggest one in the Middle East. We will stop on this a little bit later. So that's why it's still important to talk about Iran. I would even say it's more important to talk now, because it's possible to save and to stay there like a threshold state, not to do this step further, the nuclear program, because afterwards it can be inevitable, have inevitable consequences. So after my introduction part in my chapter, I'm going to the change in realities after the US withdrawal from the JCPOA. I won't stop here. A lot, all of you know about the JCPOA, how important was this agreement, and that after the withdrawal, there were several consequences which we see now. But to tell just a few points here. Oh yeah, it's a nice picture. As a few points, I like such pictures. It explains more than maybe several sentences. So this picture just explains why Trump decided really to leave JCPOA. What has happened afterwards? Of course, the sanctions were renewed, which complicated the situation around Iranian economy, just very at one moment. But there was attempt by the European Union to save the JCPOA. They have such kind of initiative Instex. The aim of this Instex was to overcome the sanctions by the United States and to save the treaty. But unfortunately, it was impossible to do it. They failed, which caused further consequences. It's Iran realized that Europe can't help Iran without United States, because first of all, because euro is not such stable currency as US dollar, and so on and so on. In this regard, it was like obvious that whether they're communicating with the United States have some common ground, whether there is no agreement with the West. And 1 year after the US withdrawal from the JCPOA, Iran announced that step by step it would also leave the treaty. Since this period, 2019, Iran became to develop its ballistic missile, its nuclear program, quicker than ever. And I would say that exactly the assassination of the General Qasem Soleimani, it's a general of the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And he was assassinated in Iraq by the US drone attack. And this caused the worsening situation between Washington and Iran. After this one, Iran started to enrich uranium till 20%, afterwards till 60%. So it caused already these raised tensions, which lead for the further deterioration of the relationships. Then next, in my chapter, I'm going back to the attention. Oh, I guess we are safe now. Back to JCPOA negotiations, how it was, and the most important, why it failed. So, what are the reasons it failed? When the Biden became a president, as you know, he immediately started the negotiation process, and it was more or less successful in 2021. But the fact that there was elections in Iran, it stopped parties from the normal negotiation process. There were some breaks and etc. etc. But in January 2022, there were really some progress. It wasn't such progress like maybe in 2013-14 when it was negotiated JCPOA, but there was a real hope for the for returning to the agreement. But already in March 2022, they paused the negotiations due to external factors. So here is the one already example why the Russian invasion of Ukraine influenced Iranian motivations, because Russia was one of the most important partners in this negotiations process. And of course, after it invaded Ukraine, there is no interest for Russia to help in the international community to solve the problem of Iran. So this is goodbye. The second issue that also, as all my colleagues stressed and will stress, that the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it creates additional challenges because it demonstrates that nuclear weapons, if you have nuclear weapons, yes, you can not only deter yourself, but literally you can do what you want to do. You can even use it for power projections, as we see Russia uses it against Ukraine, which is very tempting for Iran. Of course, Iran has a very complicated situation around this, but anyway, it's a way for Iran to think, okay, so now we will agree with the West, who is always cheating with its agreements, yes, withdraw from agreements, and we will lose the last thing to hold and in our hands to deter ourselves. Even this threshold status, it's very good for Iranian to feel itself that they can dictate some rules. So they resumed the negotiations in June, and all parties, they insisted that this is the last chance to sign the treaty. Unfortunately, as you know, there was no treaty because none of the parties was ready to do any more concessions. Also, IAEA issued a resolution on June 8th that Iran condemned Iran for not explaining traces of uranium at least at 3 undeclared locations. If to compare these negotiations with those which were before the actual JCPOA, it was different because Iran already feels itself differently. It's already have we will talk why it feels like this, but ambitions is higher, and that's why this try to negotiate one more time. It's just failed. So now new realities and stumbling blocks for those negotiations. First one is historical reasons which formed Iranian strategic and thinking and high ambitions. I won't stop here. If you are interested, we can talk about this later. But the most important here is that Iran for a long time already formed for itself that it needs to be able to do this self-defense, and this is the most important for the country's survival. The second one, it's a new possible world order. So what does it mean? This also connected with the war in Ukraine, that we see this split, yes, between Russia and the West. And in this split, Iran sees the possible winning situation for it, because it can cooperate, which is already doing now, with China, with Russia, with North Korea. They can create their own club. They can. So in this kind, Iran can support its economy. It's also maybe some international prestige level. Yes. So this new possible world order is very tempting for Iranian motivations. The second stumbling point was that Iran demanding the removal of the IRGC from the foreign terrorist organization list. IRGC came to this list in 2019 only by the United States, and the United States was not ready also to give up this point because it insisted that it's not a matter of the GCPOA negotiations, because it wasn't a matter in 2019, so it's separately, so they are not ready to discuss it. The last point here, it's Iranian ballistic arsenal. Iran is not ready to discuss its ballistic missiles program. It was not ready to discuss it in 2015, and for sure it's not ready to discuss it now. And exactly the GCPOA failed, the US withdrew from the GCPOA because they insisted okay, it's not a good treaty because Iran has possibilities to develop its ballistic arsenal and nuclear program, and we give them money for this because they insist that ballistic missile program should be included in the treaty with Iran. Why? Because Iranian, as I told already, ballistic missile program is the biggest in the Middle East, and since the withdrawal from the GCPOA now, Iran literally became better in its technologies. For example, it's developed in intermediate ballistic missile Shahab 3, Shahab 4, and these missiles already can reach the territory of Israel, of East and South Europe. So, which is, of course, not a good news for the Middle East and for part of the Europe, and which is also disturbing for the international community that in 2020, Iran launched its first military satellite, Noor the First, which means that its also space program is developing, and also there are experts that argue that if a country is possible to develop a military satellite and to launch it, then it's just a matter of time, of financial support for the country to develop ICBMs. So it's also, Iran was quite successful, I would say, during this period since 2018 till now in its capabilities. That's why its ambitions are higher than it was, and of course now Iran has such a great partner as Russia. And my last point in my chapter is Russia-Iran cooperation then and now. How did the Russian invasion of Ukraine influence Iranian motivations? I will just. So, of course, all of you know about the drone deal, yes, between the countries, which reflects the new level of Iranian-Russian cooperation. And also there was a drone deal, the second one, which was it was such a success for both countries that they decided to do another deal, to build a factory in Russia and to produce more sophisticated drones, which is really bad news for Ukraine, of course, because even old drones, they cause a lot of damage, and new design drones, they cause even more run, and But it's very successful for Iran, as you see. Russia and Iran, I want to stress it, they have quite similar strategic thinking. For example, their vision of a multipolar world order, also their mutual interest in spreading friendly regimes in other countries, yes, all those proxies. And also now, both countries, they're against the West, they're both countries which are under the sanctions. And so this gives the countries opportunity to cooperate closer. And also they are moving like further in their cooperation, also which is disturbing, like as I think here, that they were always cooperating, so it's not something new. But the thing is, which is different after the war in Ukraine, that before it was like Russia who was given its help assisting Iran, you know, with the missile technology, yes, with building its nuclear power plant, the first one, Bushehr. So it was exactly Russia, and now it's mutual military cooperation. So it gives Iran like, oh, okay, so now I'm cooperating with Russia, with the P5 country, yes, I'm given it. So they feel it's important. They feel that Russia is dependent somehow already on them. Of course, it's mutual dependence, but nevertheless, it raises their ambitions, which is not a good news for the non-proliferation regime. And they continue in September 2022, exactly when the JCPOA negotiations failed, they expressed intention to expand its cooperation in all fields, like in political, economical, trade, aerospace areas. So this cooperation is going further and further, which I believe it's not so good for international community, because just to conclude already that first of all there is deteriorating relations with Europe, which wasn't before. Iran and Europe, they were quite good together. Europe was always trying, you know, somehow to deal with Iran, to help for those negotiation process. Now it's in a bad condition. Also, of course, with the West, with the United States. And these new capabilities, Iran is a threshold state. Iran already has enough fissile material to produce several nuclear bombs. So not one, two, already several. And it's going more and more. You can see in the news that, oh, Iranian tensions are high. Oh, they enriched more and more fissile material. Experts, I see different views. Some say that Iran needs 1 week or 2 weeks to produce one nuclear bomb already, but I read another information that it's not so easy. So it's at least 6 months, maybe even about a year, because the technology is they explain. I'm not a technical person, so I can't know. So it depends, but the most important is that Iran, step by step, very quietly, not like North Korea, that's all, we are a nuclear state, here is the bomb. So it's step by step, very quietly. Now it's not, maybe it won't be, because already Iran has everything to stay at this threshold state and just to continue with this cooperation with China, with Russia, and to rebuild its economy, because it's important for this country. So, other you can read in my chapter. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today to talk a little about different fields and different trends in the nuclear field. And in my part, I will bring you back to the NATO point and bring you back to these changing circumstances and changing strategy, and especially focusing on the new strategic concept, while also in my chapter I start with a very short look back into the history, and but focusing rather on the differences between Obama strategy and the new strategic, post-Obama, let's say, 2011 strategy and new strategic concept. So just very shortly, as we all know, to set the scene, the strategies that we have through the whole history of the alliance, they are different also because of the purpose and the focus. Because when we talk about the Cold War strategies, we were mostly talking about the systematizing and to projecting. And now when we're talking about the open strategies, we're mostly talking about informing. And when we're talking about informing, it's basically the goal of informing your friends that you are there for them, and informing your enemies that you will be there to fight back. And this is something to keep in mind through the whole scene. One other thing is that when we talk about the NATO's new strategic concept, important thing is that yes, it is new in comparison with 2011, but of course, it's not so new and surprising if we look through the host and follow all these strategic concepts, all these summit communiques from year to year. So this tendency and this development, it was there through the years. But it just that in the strategy, it's the time to sum up and make the key points. And in my view, the new strategic concept, it was doing its job right because it has analyzed the main threats and it has put all and prioritized the tasks. And we will come back a little into the task and the change, the crucial change. But of course, through all the strategies and through all the summit communiques, the three key issues are there. It's deterrence and defense, crisis prevention, and cooperative security. The thing is, what do you focus on in one paper or another, in one concept or another? And of course, it's all the time the appropriate military mix. And in the new strategic concept, it is especially stressed that, of course, NATO is a defensive alliance, and no one should doubt our strength and resolve to defend every inch of allied territory, preserve sovereignty, territorial integrity, and prevail against any aggressor by the appropriate mix. And when we talk about appropriate mix, that's the conventional, the nuclear, and now much more focused on anti-ballistic missiles, which was there for years already, but it was doubt whether you should or not take it as the important and equal block, I would say, to the first two. And now, even every time, it is more and more focused on space and cyber capabilities. But in general, when we talk about these changes, and we need to keep in mind that there are lots of different factors that influence it. And I'm usually dividing it into internal factors and external factors. And the question is that every time the mix is different on what has played the crucial roles. Of course, all those elements are there at every stage when the decision is taken. But for example, at this time, when we were looking into the new NATO strategic concept, of course, there was an influence, for example, of the Biden strategy that was released very quickly before the NATO. Of course, there were some insights from over there. Of course, the economic situation this time was not playing so much role, especially because the situation with the full-scale aggression was so important that the public opinion was rather bringing focus from the economic financial contribution, how much taxes they will pay, into we need to do something because this is external factor with global crisis. And of course, the military innovations we've seen, we are seeing it through the course also, how the technology is developing and why, for example, the anti-ballistic missiles are given much more attention now. It's also because we see during the war in Ukraine how important it is to have some capacity to shield, especially because we're talking about democratic states which care about people and care about their citizens. But also equally or even more important in this case, it's about the external factors. And my colleagues have already talked a little of different aspects. I will only focus on the global crisis in a sense that the new strategic concept very clearly divides into different boxes the threats, and because of this global crisis. And for the first time, we hear and read that Russian Federation is the most significant and direct threat to allies' security and to peace and stability in the Euro-Atlantic area. For the first time, we read that China is a systematic challenge, and it's deepening strategic partnership with Russia. And of course, the channels of communication, it is equally stressed that the channels of communications are open and that US is ready to still cooperate on international terrorism and on other important issues. But from what we hear, it's also from the Russian side that they have dropped out and are not so much interested anymore because they understand, I guess, also subconsciously that they are acting as a irresponsible actors, so whatever they help with the responsible action will not improve their image, so why do care? And this is also, once again, a very irresponsible approach. And also on China, there is, every time we read that China is posing a systemic challenge and its military buildup and other factors are showing that there is a crisis, and we recognize it in the strategic concept. But at the same time, it is mentioned that the doors are open and it is possible to come back to the table of negotiations and look for some arms control and look for some solutions. Then some not so classical things for NATO is the climate change or also coming into the emerging disruptive technology, which we see as military innovation as an opportunity, but also as a potential factor on the other side as a negative one. And the terrorism, to make Trump happy, is still there, but not only Trump, of course, and we recognize that this is a big threat, and cyber. The question is then, give me a second. What is so new and what is the difference in general between 2011 and 2022? And I guess that the biggest change is the mindset of coming back to collective defense, because as we've seen, the external factors are very important and the internal. And in 2011, there was this atmosphere, the Prague speech of Obama, the arms control agreements, and this willingness to do something good for this world, to move to conventional deterrence, perhaps. This didn't help, and as it is mentioned in the strategy, world has not followed our good intentions. And I think this is the biggest problem for Ukraine as well. When we say that we are disappointed, it's not only that we were attacked. Like we knew that this scenario is possible, but the pity thing is that the world has not followed. When we've given up the nuclear weapons, the world has not followed these good intentions and ideas of maybe we can be less dependent on nuclear weapons. So, but this is not a point to cry. This is a point to get together and create a collective action and make sure that our collective defense is working well. This is exactly what NATO has tried to do. And some other key challenges is that we have a new common structure, new mobility and logistics, reinforced deployments in Europe. I will not go into details because I guess that those who are experts know it, and we can exchange the data if asked. So some practical and some structural changes in the NATO as such, but also new domains and focus on hybrid threats because the thing is that we are having the spillover effect even now with the war in Ukraine, because sometimes we see that something falls on Polish territory, sometimes on Romanian, sometimes we see the cyber attacks in the Baltics. So it is, and especially because Russia is saying from the day one that they are not fighting Ukraine. They are fighting NATO on the Ukrainian territory. And this is a very important thing when on the West sometimes there is this feeling that, well, but we are not in the war and we are afraid to get into the war because otherwise there will be the consequences. On Russian side, it is already seen as the war with NATO because otherwise they cannot explain why they didn't take Kyiv in 2 days. And then with very important, and I will also not go too much into the details, EU-NATO cooperation and much more efforts on the EU side to get involved, to reach those 2%, but also to create their own mechanism as a pillar inside NATO. To get into the few other conclusions, it's about the need of integrated common defense system where every effort counts. And this brings us back into the cooperation of structures as NATO, EU, and maybe some other allies also around the globe, but also different countries which might not be nuclear, but are now much more incorporated into the training and exercises, which have the dual capable aircrafts, which are now and also in the last communique is mentioned in the context of the nuclear deterrence, because this shield and sword strategy and also combination of the conventional and nuclear force, it's all working together with Russia, because you need to be sure that your conventional forces allows some stability to not check the nuclear umbrella, but you also need the nuclear umbrella to ensure that there is no intention to just do what was done in Ukraine. And last but not least, another point which goes through the chapter that I was writing is about the horizontal and vertical gray zones. And I think that the feeling of our approach, or mostly also the European approach, that, well, Ukraine is a common neighborhood, and we can all live together happily and all cooperate with Ukraine, and why not? Or the same thing with Moldova and with Georgia. So why to change something? It was simply not the same on the other side, where in Russia this was an unclaimed territory near abroad that will be taken when they can. And this creates the main source and danger of instability in the horizontal line. And the vertical is about the different technologies, because we are becoming so different in developments and in those aspects of hybrid war, that it is and it will be more and more exploited by Russia and other countries that want to deteriorate the international security by pointing that, well, of course, you will defend your territory, but not in case we'll make a cyber attack. Well, of course, you will defend your territory, but please don't count if there will be some migrants crossing your borders or new green men appear in one country or another. So this is a horizontal gray zone that is still there. And of course, we have to recognize that such challenges exist and look for creative solutions in both gray zone lines. Thank you very much.
So, of course, it is also now important to pay attention to what is happening in the deterrence versus disarmament discussion, because it has been quite prominent for the past couple of years. And obviously, Russia's invasion of Ukraine totally influenced this discussion. And the three aspects that I really want to focus on here is the dangerous message that is out, unfortunately, that the international instruments failed, security assurances failed, and nuclear deterrence works. So coming to international instruments, we all know that the UN Security Council really showed very limited capabilities to address the situation, because ever since the start of the invasion, the UNSC has been blocked by the Russian veto. And so it exposes that the UN cannot prevent or stop aggression if the aggressor is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. And considering that all the permanent members are nuclear weapon possessors, official ones, according to the NPT, the association that nuclear weapons allow actors to promote their own agenda, even if it's offensive, is also unavoidable. And so becoming the first steps in the direction of addressing this crucial problem, it should be some reform of the veto power, expressing the conditions under which the exercise of this veto power can be suspended. And this way, it also will address the tension between the nuclear weapons possession and the membership within the in the UN Security Council, and so connection of the nuclear weapons with the UN power structure. Another crucial issue that was touched is the credibility of security assurances. And basically, the situation that happened with the Budapest Memorandum still back in 2014, but even more so with the nuclear threats Russia has been issuing these days, could definitely trigger second thoughts in nations facing powerful, capable adversaries. And as we know, there have been reactions in different countries where public discussions, or not exact like formal discussions, but at least there appeared ideas about potentially great or positive impacts of acquiring nuclear weapons status, such as in public debate in Germany. In the recent weeks, there was an article published on this topic that like kind of sent wave across the landscape. And then also we all remember the comments that South Korean president made in spring 2023. And so it is actually really interesting that I am sitting here, Jeff, now, because I'm actually citing his work right this moment.
I didn't pay her anything to do that.
Well, it was published already, so you know. According to Jeff's study, the influence of positive assurances actually rests to an important degree on the normative delegitimizing of nuclear weapons associated with the NPT. And the Ukrainian case actually has been considered a success in terms of its disarmament due to the absence of conflict between Ukraine and other actors. However, as soon as we go back to 2014, basically this is no longer relevant. And so in this case, security assurances failed and faded into insignificance and in case of a critical threat. And in this sense, NPT addresses only one explicit qualification of non-compliance, which according to the NPT, negative security assurances are in there in its preamble. And when, so the only explicit qualification of non-compliance is when a non-nuclear weapon state does not comply with the IEA safeguards agreement that it has. At the same time, there is no specific mechanism set out within the NPT framework to address the non-compliance of the nuclear weapon states with negative security assurance obligations, only through the reference to the UN Charter and the UN Security Council, which we have already discussed. So it comes back and back to this circle, the vicious circle. And also coming to the deterrence topic, we can say that, and Polina has talked about it very profoundly already, but again, Russian deterrence policy worked precisely how it was supposed to work. Nuclear threats prevented escalation of military actions and aimed at termination on terms favorable to Russia. And we can see that powerful allies of Ukraine exercise extreme caution in providing help for Ukraine, especially at the beginning of the war, and were not entirely sure how serious the threat and credible the threat is. Whereas one cannot doubtlessly argue that NATO powers, for example, refrain from direct military involvement solely due to Russian nuclear threats. It is fair to say that Russia succeeded in raising costs for potential involvement manifold. And Another aspect of deterrence that I wanted to touch upon is that Putin has threatened nuclear use many times, but has not really followed through and made it vague enough so that it could be interpreted in many different ways. And as he later said in the fall 2022, we didn't mean that, you interpreted it like that, and this is exactly what was to expect. That's exactly was the intent. However, this blurriness of the red lines is making the whole situation more unstable because the level of ambiguity is exceptionally high, the threat is disproportional, and there is a possibility of crossing the red lines and ending up in a nuclear war scenario. And what is especially dangerous is that the countries at which this deterrence is intended can become too complacent and fail to see the actual threshold being overstepped, because, again, not following through also is good, but saying and not following through repeatedly makes the deterrence very unstable. And so what we know now about the whole system is that with this powerful and dangerous message, there can be incentives for proliferation. And my colleagues have already touched upon it. I just wanted to add a little bit to it. So we all know that proliferation, or we all believe that proliferation cannot happen so easily at the moment because we have this non-proliferation system that is very strong and has powerful security mechanisms. However, non-proliferation exists as a norm and survives as a norm because it is primarily upheld. So there is an international consensus that this norm should sustain. However, proliferation can happen if the realist mindset prevails. So the opposite consensus prevails. And while it doesn't seem to be the case at the moment, we still have to keep that in mind. And considering how unstable international arrangements have been in the last years, it is quite strange to absolutely be calm about the survival of non-proliferation as a norm. So proliferation, and the next point I wanted to make is that Ukraine dismantled its nuclear arsenal in exchange for security assurances, including commitment to refrain from economic coercion. And it deserved and was entitled to special support in protecting its territorial integrity. However, what happened instead in 2014 and in 2022 is absolutely clear. With this and the high importance that P5 assigned to their nuclear weapons, and in general, the already appearing and developing trend of relying more and more and reasonably so on the hard power and especially nuclear weapons, the international community should be reasonably cautious about potential proliferation. Not every actor, of course, would be able to afford a nuclear arsenal because of its costliness or technical complexity, and not every state would want to have one anyway. But this also can be a potential situation where we plunge into the haves and the have-nots in case the non-proliferation norm is considered obsolete. And on top of that, some states might try to exercise nuclear bargaining similar to Iran. And you have heard how Russia's cooperation with Iran and also with North Korea impacted the potential perception of the impact of the war on such policies, because basically countries don't see that there are absolutely irreversible consequences for their wrongdoing. And so the conclusion that I come to is that without the show that the role of nuclear weapons is still significant, however, it is not the absolute cornerstone that of international security, and kind of refocus a little bit on conventional means, it will be much harder, from my perspective, to contribute to the maintenance of the non-proliferation regime. And of course, this chapter does not argue for immediate or unilateral disarmament, as it indeed would create an opportunity for those not willing to disarm to abuse the vulnerable state of disarmed. So it's out of question completely. However, disarmament negotiations in good faith and recognitions of the TPNW complementarity to the NPT, along with further practical steps to achieve, first of all, arms control and getting back to arms control, will help mitigate the damage inflicted on the NPT by Russia's war against Ukraine. And of course, realistically, it will be a longer reciprocal process. And of course, we know now that nuclear weapon states have been emphasizing the need to rely on nuclear weapons more due to deteriorating international security environment. And the window of opportunity might have already been missed, but this chapter was written in 2022. So, but still, it is not off the table, because the latest nuclear non-proliferation treaty review conferences show a greater annoyance with the lack of any disarmament effort whatsoever. And if you didn't know, today is also the International Day for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Recognition. So, yeah, very fitting topic. Thank you so much for your attention. And
thank you very much, Valeriia. And I like how the arc of the presentations started more pessimistic, but attempted to pull a little nugget of optimism out at the end. When I used to teach about a mile across town that way at the Naval Postgraduate School, I would sometimes have students there who would say to me that they were worried about doing a research project that would be OBE. And at first I got confused, and I thought, I don't think your research project can be knighted and get an Order of the British Empire. But it turned out that OBE stands for Overtaken by Events. So this was a very brave research project to do, to explore the implications of Russia's invasion of Ukraine for the global nuclear order in the middle of what is still, unfortunately, an active, ongoing war. And it's a sign of how careful and thoughtful all of our scholars were, that chapters written in 2022 still hold up and have a lot to say to us today. We'll turn to Q&A in just a second. If I can use the chair's prerogative before I have to turn into a pumpkin and go to my next meeting, I'd like to say a couple things. I got into this field and first started studying about nuclear weapons and nuclear strategy as an undergraduate student in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and I was taught what was very much the conventional wisdom at the time, which was a kind of two-sided argument about nuclear deterrence, right? On the one hand, nuclear deterrence is very powerful for the things that it can deter, but on the other hand, the reach of nuclear deterrence is very strictly limited. It's very good against kind of existential type threats. it's not necessarily very good against lesser levels of aggression, and nuclear weapons are not necessarily good for compellence purposes. For all of the tragedy and many debates about the role of nuclear weapons in the war in Ukraine, I have come out of it feeling that the conventional wisdom I learned as a student has held up pretty well, right? Russia was successfully able to convince Western countries to be cautious about their level of intervention, but it didn't successfully coerce Ukraine into giving up. It didn't successfully coerce NATO countries to refrain from giving aid. And Russia has also itself found itself deterred from taking certain steps it might take for fear of escalating, the situation further. So I don't see the understanding of deterrence being greatly changed, but to some extent reaffirmed by the war. Where I think the global nuclear order has been damaged by this is in a couple areas, one of which came up a lot in the discussions here, which is the role of security assurances, which I think have been rather badly discredited by what happened and which turned out to be essentially the worthlessness of the Budapest Memorandum. The other place where I think there's been a lot of damage that was not talked about by the authors today is to the norm of nuclear non-use, what's sometimes called the nuclear taboo. I mean, thank goodness nuclear weapons haven't been used, and I think for the moment, at least the moment of maximum danger in the war has passed. But just the repeated use of fairly ostentatious nuclear threats and the lack of a lot of pushback on that by Russia in this war, I think has hurt the non-proliferation norm. So let me maybe run a few more minutes with me in the chair. I'm going to guess we have more questions than I can stay for. But so at some point I'll pass the baton to Margarita, but I can start off. For those of you who are online, you can either type a question into the chat. It looks like we have Shanila watching the machine, or you can use the raise hand function and unmute and ask your question. For those of you in the room, raise your hands. And because I know that my faculty colleague in the corner here will have to leave with me, Avner, but I'm going to give you the first question. Please introduce yourself for people who don't know you.
Thank you. I'm Avner Cohen. I know some of you indeed, actually from visiting Odesa. I have many things to say, but I'm going to say one question, which is kind of, to me, intriguing, to Polina. You mentioned twice the idea of the concept of Ukraine victory. What constitutes Ukraine victory? How do you see Ukraine victory, and how realistic that victory might be, given the situation today?
Thank you, Avner. Should I reply immediately?
Yeah. So I think we'll do question answer for as long as we have.
Yeah, thank you, Avner, for this question. This is a very relevant question during this war because there are a lot of speculations on how Ukrainian victory could look like. Well, I think that, of course, it depends on the interpretation. There can be a maximum and minimum, limits of Ukrainian victory. Because subjectively, if we look at the Ukrainian documents and the speeches of the Ukrainian president, the maximum victory will be the restoring of Ukrainian territory up to the borders of 1991. However, on my point of view, this is including Crimea. On my point of view, this is unrealistic. And in my point of view, Ukrainian victory would be restoring the borders of Ukraine up to the February 2022 and joining NATO. It would be the absolute victory of Ukraine for me. So we are not speaking about victory of Ukraine when we are speaking about strategic defeat of Russia. For us, strategic defeat of Russia is pushing Russia away from the territories they just conquered, and then not even touching even a meter of Russian legitimately recognized territory. So in this situation, it will be Ukrainian victory. But also, I think that even if Russians manage to keep Crimea, but Ukraine will be able to secure its future, as a member of NATO, it will be Ukrainian victory. Under what circumstances it's possible? Not now, probably not with Putin. However, we all know that history is full of surprising moments, as the collapse of the Soviet Union, as the coup d'etat against Gorbachev, right? So there are a lot of moments, and again, as Maidan, in 2014, which actually opened the window for Russia to do this thing with Crimea. When everyone was concerned with the central problem, they just used that opportunity to take it away. So we just should probably be very, very ready for doing something and looking very precisely on what is happening within Russia. Because at some point, Russia may be, as it happens sometimes in history, too much concerned with its own internal situation, too quite weakened with the war and the internal situation, to really dedicate itself to, like destroying Ukraine or preventing Ukraine from its further way to the west. So it may happen when Putin will be already going away from power, like the process of transition between Putin and the successor, because I have a strong superstition that there won't be like one successor, one and only, because Putin is so much afraid of losing power that he's just, I would say, demolishing everyone who can have any ambitions for power. So at the end, we'll have a lot of equal, not very bright persons who start fighting for the power, and then this will be the moment when Russia will be too much concentrated on its.
So, tiny bit following question. So, essentially, you do not believe that in the near-term future there is realistic military prospect for Ukraine to get back those 18% territory?
Not in 2024, when the amount of weapon supplies from Europe has diminished to minimum, and the United States are not even, giving any help. 2025 will show, but again, the result of the elections in the United States will affect, because we all know that Putin now hopes to take over everything which he lost in the previous year because of the weakness of Ukraine, because of that same problem, which I mentioned. And also he hopes for the re-election of Trump and for the further agreement. So the 2024 will be absolutely, miracles happen, but I don't believe that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I congratulated Polina in advance, but I also take this opportunity to congratulate all of you. I think it's wonderful to have this. It's somehow history in the making. Basically, we hear this and it's so actual. Well, I have a couple of comments on the implications of the war. When you talk about Sweden and Finland, I think we don't have to forget that there's huge implications for the NATO eastern flank states, because then we became also I don't know how to say it, but equal NATO members. Because then all of a sudden you know what happened since 2014. In this area, so I think was well. I don't know how to say. I don't want to thank to this, but it's something that we also felt that now is the time that what we always have advocated against Russia on the possible. Well, this is happened, but it shouldn't happen this way. We should have maybe reinforced before this happened. So this is one. Second, on the strategic concept, excellent. I would say excellent, President. But I also was part of this historical moment, and I think there are some other premieres. I would say one of them is the Black Sea as a region of strategic importance. It's the first time when we have in a public official strategic document. Black Sea and mentioned, and from then on, I think
Could you try again?
We have started to work. You see, when you say Black Sea, it's already catching up. Another thing, it's of course China as a challenge, but it was again IP4 partners. Indo-Pacific partners, and I think it's we have to recognize what they are doing in supporting Ukraine and how valuable are in this conversation, because they feel already the threat. I was talking to one of our colleagues from Australia these days, and they said, well, a couple of years back, we thought geography is our deterrence, but now it's nothing. Cyber attacks and everything will be cut off. So strategic concept IP4, it's again extremely relevant. Of course, vulnerable partners. Again, they are also mentioned in this strategic concept. And now I have two questions on Iran. Of course, if you could give us some, how do you see now Israel reacting to the fact that Iran it's so close, and also what in connection to what we have now in the Middle East. And I think the second it's on the strategic concept. How do you see this document as a forward-looking? Because this is not just for these years, but it's for maybe for 10 years. Do you think it will respond to the challenges and threats even in 5 years or more? Thank you.
Thank you. And do you want to introduce yourself? Because some
Yes.
of our
So I'm Doris Seban. I'm from Romania. I work now with the Romanian delegation to NATO.
Thank you. So since there are a few questions, I think we'll take that cluster of questions, and then we'll just maybe if time permits, we'll have. No, we're answering. Yeah. So yeah, answer questions.
Yeah. As for Israel, it's very interesting and complicated at the same time. So the first point to understand is that Israel and Iran, it's like enemies, historical enemies, and it's not going to improve. Also, maybe you heard that Israel has a certain policy that Israel won't be the first country in the Middle East to demonstrate its nuclear weapons, but it wouldn't be the second one. So it's quite provocative, but it gives to all countries, especially in the Middle East, to understand that don't produce nuclear weapons, don't be nuclear country, because there will be consequences. So due to what is going now in the Middle East, it's what is going on that Iran, it's quite active with its proxies. So exactly Iranian support for proxies for Palestinians plays a crucial role in this conflict. That's why the relationship there in the Middle East is deteriorating even more. So Iran is actually quite close to this war because it supports proxies. It's the second one. And also, Israel is not interested in any agreement, in any JCPOA with Iran, because Israel and also Saudi Arabia is not interested, because it means that with the JCPOA agreement, Iran has more chances to restore economy, to go to the oil market, which is, of course, it's mostly not good for Saudi Arabia, and also there is such a series, and why Trump has withdrawn from the JCPOA in 2019. It's because of the Israel and Saudi Arabia, because they were pushing them, because as you know, US and Israel, they're big friends, I would say, and also United States are interested in Saudi Arabia cooperation, and they were not interested in this agreement, and also in the renewal of the negotiations. Israel all the time insists that and hinted that the only chance to stop Iran is to do this prevention attack. So hinted in all directions on this one, so that no negotiations will work. So we need to do military intervention on Iran. And also, as for Iran, that it's very convenient for Iran to be on this threshold status, because it's very close to obtain nuclear weapons. In this mean it gives Israel and US this cautious behavior with Iran. But on the other hand, it's not nuclear weapon state. So actually, Israel and US can't do not want, but yes, not so many reasons to do this military intervention. So this threshold, it is quite good for Iran. But yes, as for the relations and situation, it's quite complicated. And as I already told, Iranian intervention on the support of the Palestinian proxies plays a crucial role. Also, I guess maybe Iran also thinks that if Israel will be busy with its own war, there will be not so many intervention on Iranian nuclear program and in Iranian all the situation with Iran, because at the moment for Iran it's almost impossible secretly to create a nuclear weapon, because the Israel intelligence is on the all the time in the region. So it's to do it secretly is very difficult. But if Israel will be busy with its own war, it maybe will be some window to do something, maybe not nuclear weapons, but at least to develop something more
several, yes, and I will answer my part of the question. First of all, thank you for kind words and also for comments. It's very much appreciated to know from those who were participating and taking part. And absolutely agree, especially about the partners. This is I actually, and it is connected also to the question that you have asked. I think that the best thing that this strategic concept has made, it has set quite clearly the box of partners, and now in the box, in the chapter of partners, we really have partners. Not like after 2011 we had Russia, for example, as a biggest partnership. And now we have their real friends and real cooperation, which we envisage that in the upcoming years will be the most relevant ones. And they have set out the box of the threats, which includes the short-term, the mid-term, and the long-term threats. And this is now also, of course, when in NATO they are talking about the China threat. It is not about that we are already in the war or we are on the edge of the war, but that's looking forward. That's exactly how you are saying, looking into 5, 10, 15 years forward, what can be a challenge and how we need to get a little more prepared and rather avoid the reactive approach, but to know what we would need in case something is happening, and prepare the alliances in the East, and prepare our also strategic autonomy, much talked about in the EU lately, and things like this. And in this regard, I think that the concept was well worked through, and it was also useful that just before that there was a 2030, it was called strategy.
NATO agenda.
2030 agenda, and that was not an obligatory document or not a voted document, but that was a very deep research work of different countries, including the neighbors. I know that Ukraine is very proud that they've participated into working into this document, but that was indeed a research work that has laid the ground for political decisions later on in this strategy. And in this regard, I think that NATO has made a great job. Although, of course, the situation is very dynamic, but this is why we have the summit communiques every year to add something else, to change the focus and to adapt.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Iryna has
very brief comments to all my colleagues already said, but I want to back to Polina's word about and answering Avner Cohen question about victory of Ukraine. So Polina mentioned very important thing about that we have to be prepared to this, exact opportunity not to lose our chance. But I want to stress that it's not only about Ukraine, it's mostly about our partners. Because it's exactly the moment that Ukraine needs the most support in this case. To provide help and to provide exactly not only diplomatic, but first of all military assistance. Because, for example, 2024 for us, it's a very crucial moment exactly because there is a drastic lack of weapons. And unfortunately, there is no prospects to cover this lack. Yesterday, sorry, I forgot the German participant from Naval School. He stressed that it's incredible. For 2 years, Europe was not prepared mentality, to start producing new weapons. So, in this, I don't want to say these words now, but for me, it's like no one believes in victory of Ukraine. And unfortunately, to some extent, it's still relevant, these thoughts. And that's why I want to stress that the United States and European countries, NATO allies, should be prepared exactly to catch this moment and to stop this war, because it's about the security of all Europe. And in this case, yes, of course, NATO plays the crucial role. That's why you know that Ukraine is very on the diplomatic, on expert level, very appreciate Poland and Baltic countries as well as Romania efforts, to elaborate this eastern flank of Ukraine, to strengthen it, but also to elaborate security cooperation on the regional level. But again, we are back to that it's like medium countries, and they are very limited with power. But it's important exactly to have the common voice, NATO, United Nations, and so on.
Just two fingers, to have a voice. Just to cite that recent tweet of President Macron that the spirit of defeat is in the air. When you are explaining your boundaries, it means that you are already defeated. Finally, somebody in Europe just gave this idea which we are trying to, which is in the air all the time. Finally, somebody started to tell the truth, which is obvious now.
Not to be afraid to tell this, yes.
Well, yeah, probably he was answering for the critique, but he's very, sincere, and that's true. That Europe just showed that it's already surrendered with this Putin threats.
And this is especially concerning, being given that we already had the experience of 2014 when we tried to warn everyone. No one reacted to this. We saw what happened, and now the same situation in a different form again.
I think we have to stop